Well, the first hour is actually pretty good. I'm John Renton with the retro review of WCW Sin 2001. They were in Indianapolis, Indiana, 6,600 people in attendance in a 19,000 seat venue. That's the state of WCW by this point. It was their third to last pay-per-view, and it was really fucking sad. There were some good talents to great talents to talents that could have led this company into the new millennium and actually, kept the company going for another 5 years. But nope, Jamie Kellner decided to be a fucking jackass, cancel it, even though they were still earning pretty damn high ratings. They were losing a lot of money, but they could have been retooled. At least it would have been interesting to see what WCW could have done under new management with Eric Bischoff. But I'll talk about that when the last Nitro review comes up sometime in March. So as for this event, Shivani and Scott Hudson called it like a sporting event, which was really goddamn nice. They got rid of Mark Madden, so the commentary was really goddamn good. The show itself got messy around the penalty box match and then just descended further into madness, and then Sid's leg break, which they thankfully mostly edited out of the network version, but John Laurinaitis is a fucking piece of shit for making Sid add an aerial move to his offense, despite the fact he's 6'9", 325 pounds, covered the ground that he walked on, and did not need to do a fucking big boot off the goddamn ropes when he was that big, and also the fact he was 40, and even though he was in great shape, the human body, especially at that size, is not meant to do that shit. And Sid could already do a bunch of stuff that some big guys couldn't actually do. And he really had that intimidating look. And whether his career would have gone on and, been main event worthy in the future is subject for debate. I mean, WCW did close down. I don't know how much, interest there would have been in Vince bringing him back. But really, this is so goddamn unnecessary. I'm going to talk about that here in a little bit because actually the first part was pretty damn good. Chavo Guerrero Jr. and Shane Helms for the Cruiserweight Championship. Really good stuff. Best match on the goddamn show, in my personal opinion. This is when the Cruiserweights really were reinventing themselves as far as, making themselves the focal point of the show. Now, they'd always been a good part of the show from the time the Cruiserweight division had been invented or, brought over to, WCW because, New Japan's junior heavyweight division, you had Lucha Libre, you had all this stuff. So you had all these parts melded together in WCW and a lot of great talents, and Helms and Chavo Guerrero Jr. did a whole lot of really, really great shit. And it was fantastic stuff. They, had some good strikes, some nice wrestling. Chavo with really nice heel work here. Chavo Guerrero Jr. for a period of time was one of the much better workers in wrestling. It's just a shame. Everybody remembers Eddie way more. To be fair, Eddie had way more charisma. But Chavo was a really, really good worker, and him and Eddie had a great, time tag teaming. Let's just forget about Kerwin White. Please, let's all forget about that. But later, we get a dive outside by Chavo to a huge pop. Helms then does a really cool dive as well. Nightmare on Helm Street, just for 2. We get some reversals, trying to hit their finish, and then Brainbuster 1, 2, 3. Really good match. I encourage you guys to go check this shit out. We then get commentary running down the card. Footage of Tenay waiting for Flair's limo. He's looking for answers to who the mystery man is. And this guy will rock Scott Steiner's world tonight. Okay, Flair, not here to kink shame, but I don't think that's what he means by being the hookup. But it is what it is. We then get Vito versus Reno, grudge match. It started hot. There was a huge superplex at one point. I didn't really care for this feud because it was just too often on again, off again. And these are two big guys. Vito was a lot better. Reno, I don't think, lasted very long. I think he either suffered some kind of injury or just decided to take himself out of wrestling. He was a big guy and he could move pretty good, but he didn't last very long. And Vito, they tried to make this work. It ultimately was just a decent match, but at least they took it seriously. We get an elbow drop from Vito, sort of. I think he didn't quite gauge the distance there, but these things happen. A slugfest. And suddenly, roll the dice where Reno does this. Doesn't look like a roll the dice, in my personal opinion. I don't care how many times I've been in casinos. There's no way that looks like a roll the dice, especially in wrestling with men in their little tights wrestling around with each other. But he got the victory. And so the Natural Born Thrillers go up like 1-0 as far as over their opponents. We then get Sanders talking about getting Chronic to do things for him by handing Bryan Adams a lot of money in a dark room, and that's pretty much it right there. But then Clark says, hey, wait, I got an even bigger wad from somebody. Okay, we're getting big wads on pay-per-view. Also a very green and dark room. Somehow they managed to make a very green room that should have been bright very, very dark. So This is all leading to, what's going to happen during the Sanders-Miller match after the Young Dragons with Leia Meow versus Noble and Courageous. A match added literally the day of the pay-per-view. That being said, it was a car crash. Lots of flips and flippy shit and dives and a bad landing in the corner by Evan. Looked like he might have busted his face. We get hard kicks and strikes. We get some really, nice dives by Kaz and some very, very good stuff. This was really a car crash match. It could have been just featured on Nitro, but it was nice that these guys got a pay-per-view payoff for whatever those were worth in WCW. And then powerbomb off the ropes for 2. 450 by Evan for 2. It was, I think, called the Firebird Splash, but I'm just going to call it the 450 because that's what many people called it. Tombstone for 2. Yang overshot the twisting corkscrew moonsault. I mean, just totally overshot it, but these things happen. And then an inside cradle. After he missed it, he got an inside cradle on Noble 1, 2, 3. Then Noble and Courageous beat him up afterwards, and I don't think they teamed up very much longer after this. We then get Totally Buff arriving in what I believe was the precursor to the PT Cruiser. It was really silly. It was like a pimp mobile. Looked like clowns should have popped out of it. And they say, well, they have ways to get rid of Goldberg. Hey, maybe we'll have somebody run us over and then Goldberg will get disqualified. Or somebody will run in and get disqualified. It's hard to really pay attention to anything Luger says, and Buff Bagwell was never great on promos either. I think Sanders talks as Hudson just fucking crushes him. I mean, absolutely crushes him. I mean, he just says, with Sanders, the closed caption people are going to have difficulty. These may not be complete sentences. Scott Hudson just fucking crushing him. It was great. And I mean, I got nothing against Mike Sanders as a person, but on-screen persona, I hope Hudson was actually just playing it up. I don't know if he was, because this seemed pretty damn legit. He was just fucking upset, and Schiavone, I think, was even taken aback, like, God damn, Hudson. And then we get Mike Sanders versus Ernest Miller, who's bald now, completely bald, with Miss Jones for the commissionership. But first, they both cut promos about who the fans love. Schiavone was wondering why Sanders wanted to do that or whatever. It's like, why is he doing this? And and Hudson just gets off another line. I don't know. Why does he do anything? It's like, what did Hudson? Was Hudson owed money from Mike Sanders because of he didn't pay him back for a rental car or something? What the fuck was this about? But Scott Hudson, I kind of miss that guy on wrestling programs. Somebody told me he was doing some kind of radio show, which I may have to listen to at some point. The match was what it was. Miss Jones chases Sanders around with a chair. Jindrak and Stasiak come down to help out Sanders, and then Chronic comes down and attacks. They attack, Jindrak and Stasiak and Sanders, stuff the money in his mouth, and then we get the Feliner kick 1, 2, 3. He's the new commissioner, even though he's the old commissioner before. And this storyline, I think thankfully is done, though they would kind of break up the Natural Born Thrillers a little bit later, either just before or right after Super Brawl, and then the company would just descend further into madness until Greed and then the last Thunder and Nitro. Or the last 2 Nitros and Thunders. So this was what it was. Flair then shows Goldberg, hey, look at the idiots here arriving in that weird car. What the fuck's that about? He didn't say that, but he should have. And then a fan wants a picture with Goldberg. He's like, yeah, sure. And Goldberg's always been about the fans. I said as much in my, untold review about his streak. And he does that, but this fan factors in later. Jarrett then talks about how he's going to crown Mean Gene, still not draw a dime. And we get Team Canada, Skipper, Storm, and Awesome with Major Guns versus Filthy Animals, Conan, Kidman, and Ray with Tigress. And it's a penalty box match. Special referee Jim Duggan. Basically, break the rules. You go in the penalty box for either 1 or 2 minutes, and there's various penalty boxes, or 2 penalty boxes, 1 for the Animals, 1 for Team Canada. This would be the precursor to the King of the Mountain match, I believe, because it sort of makes sense if you take the fall. Except in that match, if you took the fall, you would end up being put in the penalty box for a minute or 2, something like that. This was messy, and this is right where the show started to kind of go into Russo-esque, fucking bullshit, even though Russo was not anywhere near the company at this point. Thank fucking God, that's why the product got steadily better. They just couldn't stop with the over-gimmicked bullshit, and unfortunately, it got worse as it went along. Bumping into the ref, that's a paddling. I mean, a penalty. They really should have just had Jasper there. Somebody playing Jasper. Double teaming, that's a penalty. The women get each other wet. I'm going to let that sit there for a second and see what you guys think. And then Awesome had scissors for some reason. I don't know. Maybe Sid handed them to him. He's like, go find Arn. I have nothing against Arn. You do. So anyway, the Maple Leaf ends up tapping Kidman. And Duggan called it right down the middle. I'll give him credit for that, but this was really messy. This was one of the longest matches on the show. Might have been the longest match on the show, actually, and it was not good. It wasn't. Despite the talent involved, it wasn't all that good. And then we get the Thrillers interview with Tenay. Palumbo and O'Haire will face off against Nash and DDP. And he says, watch, in 5 years, O'Haire and, Palumbo are going to be writing these things. And, yeah, it's very unfortunate about O'Haire. Palumbo apparently is doing fine for himself, doing custom-made motorcycles. So good for him. Then DDP and Nash work out. DDP's doing yoga. Gee, if only he'd stuck with that, he might have made a goddamn motherfucking fortune out of it. I like DDP. Just, boy, he loves to talk about his yoga. Does help people, though. We think of Ming versus Terry Funk versus Crowbar with Daphne bouncing around, and that was a bonus. That was actually pretty damn nice. I said bonus. I said bonus, by the way. I run a clean show. If you believe that, you have not paid attention to the first 10 minutes of the show. So as for the hardcore title, normally I don't mind if matches are messy, but this is where Ming was totally checked out. Funk was just brought back for absolutely no goddamn reason. I love Terry Funk. But after being in WCW earlier in late 99, early 2000, he didn't really need to come back in late 2000, early 2001. Again, I love Funk, but this was unnecessary. And then Daphne just, splashes Funk during his entrance, and then they battle to the back, and they're in the women's restroom. Ming, by the way, at this point was in the ring, and was like, I'll go do something. Ming, by the way, would be gone from the company about a week or 10 days later, and he would show up at the 2001 Royal Rumble, which I will retro-review. I'm actually going to retro-review a few Royal Rumbles in January, because for fun, and it's also good to look back at Rumbles that had crowds, because I don't think this Rumble is going to have much of a crowd. Anyway, Ming eventually joins in where trash is all over the women's bathroom. I hope they had, cleanup crews ready to take care of that. Trash, a mop bucket, table burial. Ming gets buried under a bunch of tables, gets a trash can and a chair cracked into his head. We had a leg drop off a high rise of seats on Funk through a table as we get back to ringside. The camera then, for whatever reason, even though it was shooting in the dark for a bit, is it just me or did it get really, really white? And I mean white like me. I mean, it got really, really milky white, like we suddenly went into a British detective show. And then we have a guardrail being broken. Crowbar's ankle just getting caught in there. I mean, God, that looked brutal. Chairs to the head and knees. Figure 4 on Funk. Top rope splash by Ming. And Ming's head getting, just hammered with chairs. And then eventually Crowbar gets knocked out. Tongan death grip to Funk. And 1, 2, 3, new and last hardcore champion. Because once Ming left with the hardcore championship, they were like, well, this company's about to go to shit. Let's not bother with a new hardcore champion. Probably smart, because the WCW Hardcore Championship was never any fucking good. They give a Screaming Norman, though. So that was a bonus. Norman somehow made that work. We're thinking Flair telling Miller, by the way, to take the rest of the night off, go with Miss Jones, and pork each other in the limousine. That's not what he said, but he might as well have said that. I don't think they were actually dating, but I wouldn't have been put it past Flair to insinuate that. We think it's Sid whispering, I'm the original madman. And I love Sid, but Sid should have not. I mean, there's dramatic whispering, and then there's like, Sid, did you forget that people can't hear you if you barely talk above a whisper? Barely talk above a whisper? No, you can't do that. Anyway, Palumbo and O'Haire versus the Insiders, DDP and Nash. This is where things really started to fall. Now, I get it, because they were leading up to forming the Magnificent Seven and all that, and Flair and his group and stuff like that, so I get the point. But this is when the tag titles started to not really mean much of anything. Flair orders all of the Thrillers, not Palumbo or O'Haire, to be backstage, and Sanders is no longer the commissioner, or they'll be fined and suspended. And this was at times decent, but it got messy. I mean, the tag action was, I guess, okay. Stasiak runs down. He gets taken down by security, and then Luger comes through the crowd, has a chair, slides a chair in the ring, and then DDP battles with him into the crowd. And then Buff hits Nash with a wrench. Don't want to be your monkey wrench. That song has been in my head for a while and will continue to be in my head because I'm weird like that. And a Shanton Bomb for 3. So there we go. You know what? This at this point is what the fucking, show deserves. Because it descended from, pretty good, even though Sanders and Miller wasn't going to be a classic. From the penalty box match on down, it just got worse. It got sloppy, and then it got even worse. The Thrillers celebrate. Flair says it's time. He goes to get the mystery man that apparently, I assume, was somewhere nearby. Because the day of a pay-per-view, you're going to leave in your limousine with an hour left to go. So, Shane's promos, same as it ever was. It's Shane Douglas versus Hugh Morris. Yes, general erection, but again, Hugh Morris is a less stupid name. It's a first blood steel chain match, and instead of on a pole, it's hanging up on a hook. You have to get a ladder. Whose bright idea was it to put, by the way, for the U.S. title, by the way, whose bright idea was it to put Shane Douglas with his body broken down versus Hugh Morris in a fucking ladder match stipulation? They just had to use the weapon as a ladder. Any drop of blood ends it. They should have had it where you have to be, massively busted open, like that Flair-Hogan match at Uncensored 99. That match nobody fucking asked for at that point. No wonder that company was in the shitter. And then, this is bad. This is real goddamn bad. Douglas, at this point, is fucking washed. They go into the crowd a little bit later. We get a ladder bump. After Hugh Morris had gotten the chain, the referee gets bumped. And earlier he had checked Shane for a whole bunch of chain of fools, because he didn't check the boot. He pulls out the chain from the boot and then gets the other chain and busts open Hugh Morris, hides the other chain that he had, and gets the victory. So he's a new U.S. champion. New blood. They had Shane Douglas as part of the new blood, and now they finally gave him a championship in the dying days of the promotion. Actually, now that I think about Shane Douglas' career, pretty much from 97 on, that actually makes a whole lot of goddamn sense. So Hugh Morris is upset backstage. Wall and Lashley were trying to tell him oh, don't worry, you're going to get the title back. Oh, no, I lost. Totally Buff, Buff Bagwell, and Lex Luger versus Goldberg and Sarge. It's an ODQ match because Totally Buff talked about somebody killing them, basically, writing them down to get Goldberg disqualified. Cool, whatever. Yeah, Goldberg's career is on the line. Story was Sarge couldn't do much because he had a busted hand. And the no DQ rules, yet they use legal tags. And about 20 years later, they're doing the same damn thing in WWE, on Raw and NXT, doing legal tags and street fights. Does nobody understand what no DQ rules are? So, the fan from earlier shows up in the front row and ends up macing Goldberg after Luger gets in his face. Oh no, it was a plant. Because the fan gets tackled, but then it's just allowed to stay ringside. They're like, oh, okay. We weren't clued in on this, but now we are, apparently. So this guy can just stay there and, jump around. It had really, really loose-fitting jeans. You could have fit like 5 fans in those damn things. And super blockbuster while Sarge is taken out because Goldberg's all blinded and maced. 1, 2, 3. Goldberg's career is over. This was apparently to give him time off for shoulder surgery. And had WCW survived, Bischoff's group and all that, would have been interesting to see what Goldberg could have done. Not evolving his character one goddamn bit. Because really, by this point, Goldberg couldn't work long matches. He couldn't. He was never meant to. But yeah, there's commentators are selling this whole damn thing. Like, oh no, Goldberg's all like this. Oh no, it's fucking terrible. Steiner, Jarrett, Sid, and the mystery man that doesn't show up until way later. 4-way world title match. Flair says, I didn't say when the mystery man would show up, so you guys got to fight. There were 8 minutes left on this show. Or in this match. Now, to be fair, the running time is to 2 hours and 53 minutes. So even if the Sid leg break had not happened, I don't think they could have gone more than a couple minutes. But the mystery man shows up and he's all decked out in the worst Jason cosplay. It's like Dollar Store Jason cosplay, Party City Jason cosplay, Spirit of Halloween Jason cosplay. And then they have where Sid tosses Jarrett into the crowd. And then they stay on Jarrett and then they cut back to the mystery man coming out of the limousine. And they have cut Sid's leg break where, they cut it where he did the big boot off of there. And it's like just fucking snap because he's a huge guy. And that'd be a stupid idea for somebody even 250 pounds to do. Or maybe even 200 pounds. Like, doing that kind of move. No, you don't do a single leg drop kick. He should have done a drop kick and then landed and maybe hit his back. But goddamn, that was such a bad idea. And you can still see the leg fucking flopping around. It's gross. It's goddamn gross. So gross. And then the Mystery Man shows up and lays the boots to Scott. Scott, by the way, is doing his safest to hit Sid, despite the fact Sid is basically screaming, "My leg is broken, you fucking idiot." At least he should have screamed that. I mean, and Scott wasn't attacking the leg. Jared is completely out of the goddamn picture. Probably went to, I don't know, party with somebody because he was doing that at the time before he got sober, and sobriety is good. But so Scott and the Mystery Man, they lay a few boots. I think the Mystery Man kicks Sid a couple times, and Scott covers him, thankfully hooking the leg that isn't broken, 1, 2, 3, to retain. And the Mystery Man is Road Warrior Animal to actually a pretty decent pop. To a pretty decent goddamn pop. Here's the problem. It was in front of 6,000 people in the dying days of the company. And yes, that is, some old stomping ground for the AWA. And the Road Warriors, their legacy, is world class, honestly, legendary. They are known in Road Warrior Pop, all that shit. So it was cool to get a reaction to Road Warrior Animal, but it's just such a bizarre return. Sid, that leg break, Scott retaining was cool, but that leg break, sweet Christ, the show was a goddamn mess. It was really a goddamn mess. But let me know what you guys thought of the show in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.